Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. There will be people joining us. Please, as you join the call as an audience member, please mute your phone. I want to welcome our legislators to our spring forum, the post-General Assembly session forum. Our moderator today will be Greg Riddell. He's the co-chair of the Government and Business Affairs Committee. Again, if audience members have questions, please use the chat feature located in the Zoom. You send those questions directly to me, William Chambers. As time allows, we will get to these questions during today's forum. The work of the Chamber could not be done without our patron sponsors. I want to give a shout out to all of our patron sponsors, but in particular our diamond sponsors, Beacon at Salisbury University, the Ross in downtown Salisbury, the Maryland and Delaware group of Long and Foster, Effective, a Comcast company, the Salisbury Independent, D3, ABC, Channel 47, Pohanka Automotive Group, Purdue Farms, and Vizion. Without those and all of our patron sponsors, the work of the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce wouldn't just be possible. I want to remind everybody on Friday, we have a 4-part Beacon series that the Chamber is doing with Beacon, and it will be exploring various sectors of our economy. We'll start at 11 a.m. Each sector will have a 45-minute session. The sector that starts at 11 a.m. will involve retail, consumer services, and restaurants. At noon, we'll have construction and real estate. At 1 o'clock, utilities, manufacturing, and transportation. At 2 o'clock, public health and education. We have guest panelists along with some of the economic experts at Beacon at Salisbury University. We're working with our restaurateurs as well and the president, CEO of the Maryland Restaurant Association. We will have another meeting with Lower Shore restaurant owners next Tuesday, the 19th of May at 2:30. If you would like the Zoom link to that, you can go on our calendar of events at the Chamber website and get that information, or you can shoot me an email. I'll pass that on to you as well. I'd like all of you that are joining us today to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
of the United
States of America,
to the
and
republic
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all. Amen.
Thank you all. I want to introduce the chairperson of the Board of Directors for the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce to bring some brief greetings, and then I will introduce Greg Riddell, our moderator. So I'd like to introduce Ms. Carrie Todd.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad to be seeing everyone. I miss people, believe it or not. I really, really, really do. But I greatly appreciate your time today on behalf of the Chamber, and the Chamber is doing great work for us, advocating as well as putting information out there. And in turn, we can now host these types of meetings so we can still finalize what happened in the legislature. So thank you, everyone, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now to go over the ground rules for today, I'd like to introduce the co-chair of the Government and Business Affairs Committee, who have worked hard developing some very important questions for today's forum. So I'm going to turn this over to Greg Riddell. Thank you, Greg.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the debrief session for the perfectly normal, nothing to see here, absolutely ordinary 2019 to 20 legislative session for the state of Maryland. Let me begin by introducing the Maryland Eastern Shore Legislative Delegation. With us are delegates Carl Anderton, Charles Otto, Johnny Motz, Wayne Hartman, Chris Adams, and Speaker Pro Tem Cherie Sample Hughes, as well as Senators Addie Eckert and Mary Beth Carrozza. The format will be 1 minute to answer each question. So every delegate and senator will have 1 minute to respond to each question asked. And at the end, there will be about 1.5 minutes for a closing of whatever kind they choose by each delegate and senator. And a reminder, Bill mentioned it, but at the bottom of the Zoom screen, there's a chat feature. If you open that, and at the bottom of the chat change the two from everyone to William Chambers. If there's an audience question you'd like to submit, send that to Bill privately. He'll screen them, and as we have time, we'll get to those. So with that, let me jump right in and get started. I have here the questions that 2.5 months ago we had set up for this. We can be done with that. Then everything changed. So considering the way the world exists today, we're going to start right out with getting to what everyone has on their mind, COVID-19, and what goes with it. To begin with, according to PEZ research, in 2019, 73% of the nation's households had broadband service. Estimates of access in Wycomico County households alone range from 40 to 65%. Recognizing that recent reforms, such as permitting companies like Chop Tank Electric to provide service, is a step in the right direction, this step will not address the lack of broadband access to the Lower Eastern Shore. What would you support to bring broadband access, especially in an environment where we may have more and more occasion to require it so that our students can get the kind of educational experience they're entitled to? And I'll start with Delegate Anderton.
Oh, right on. Okay, well, how y'all doing? It's really cool seeing everybody. Give me a virtual high five if you can hear me. I'm watching. Y'all, there we go. Okay, cool. All right. So expanding broadband across the Lower Shore, I mean, that's something that is absolutely important to all of us. I grew up, of course, in Somerset County. My family's all there, and my own parents cannot get broadband service to their home. Neither can my sister nor my brother. They all have to use these little hotspot cards and all this stuff. So this is 2020. Hey, Chris, you got a big head. Look good. So it just popped on my screen. The bill we passed last year is a step in the right direction. We have a long way to go. The best way is by just continue to advocate on behalf of citizens here with Verizon and Comcast and hope for more competition, because I believe competition is key to opening up the market. We're a viable market for high-speed internet. We have gigabit fiber being laid in downtown Salisbury, so it's good to see that spread. I know that entrepreneurs like Elon Musk are looking at satellite service and things of that nature. So, we just have to continue to make noise in Annapolis as best we can, and in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate Otto. I think he may be muted. Charles, if you're there.
There we go. I had unmuted it, but then the host muted me again. So, broadband. We've been working on that during my term in the legislature and before that. And as you said, this unfortunate circumstances has highlighted the need and the less opportunities we've had because of the lack of the broadband. We've started the Maryland Broadband Cooperative to have the cable around the spine, so to speak, and now we need that last mile, and we supported the efforts of Chop Tank Electric to move forward and try to provide that, just like they did with electricity in the 1940s and 50s.
Let's move on to Delegate Motz.
Okay, great. Well, I think this experience we're going through right now has highlighted the importance of high-speed broadband. I don't think anyone would argue that high-speed broadband is not a luxury. It's an essential utility. And I think something we can do as a group is to basically somehow proclaim it or make it an essential utility. It can't be. There should not be a question, and saying that the Lower Delmarva is going to be a broadband desert is just unacceptable. I think it needs to be highlighted and pushed. I think this experience we're going through right now has also demonstrated the failures of our state's IT system. We're experiencing that right now with the Department of Labor, but if you go over to DHR, you're going to find the exact same problem. The Augustine Commission a few years ago recommended that we privatize our IT system. I think that the entire way we approach IT from a state perspective has got to evolve. We've got to come into to current times. In fact, we need to get ahead of current times. And I think there should be changes at the state level on how our IT is delivered, how it's treated, to make it a universal, necessary utility. And in doing that, we've got to find a way to diffuse local competitors. We've got great local entities that are trying to bring high-speed broadband. When the rubber hits the road, invariably you run into a marketplace problem where you've got one competitor fighting against the next competitor. We can't afford that. We don't need that.
Thank you, Delegate Maltz. Time's up. I'm sorry, we've got to move on. 1 minute each.
I may not have mentioned Carrie will be our police person for our timing.
Well, this is going to be good.
Delegate Hartman, you're up.
Here we go.
Thank you. As we heard already, it's that last mile, and as we all know, it's not profitable. So we're going to have to continue enabling legislation like we did with House Bill 999, which was the Chop Tank Electric Bill. I think that was signed on May 8th by the governor. But hopefully in combination with other things, there was a lot of talk this year about the data storage centers and so forth. So if we continue to be able to build those opportunities and incorporate extending that last mile, as Delegate Otto had said, I think this really highlights the challenges that we're going to face. I think that with COVID, it's a new way of life. And I think more now than ever, we have to prioritize just enabling legislation. I'm a big fan of it. We shouldn't be restricting companies. We should be taking down those barriers and letting companies move forward.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Greg. And I've got my timer on here, so I'll stick within 1 minute. Well, we passed a bill this year, specifically related to a local company, Chop Tank Electric, to deliver broadband, to use their infrastructure to move forward. So all eyes on Chop Tank Electric. This is a major step. It was a heavy lift. Certainly Chop Tank Electric went to the mat to pass this bill. We did make some amendments to protect the electrical users, that this not be cross-subsidized, and some other issues that go along with it. But the long and the short of it is that I'd be asking Chop Tank Electric timeframes, asking what their goals are. Clearly, the Eastern Shore stands to benefit from Chop Tank's leadership on this issue, and provided they're able to execute, I think this answer is exactly the one you're looking for, which is we, through the Speaker Pro Tem's leadership, delivered a bill that should directly address the issue, and I should leave the balance of it to her to talk in more detail. So thank you.
Speaking of the Speaker Pro Tem, Delegate Cherie Semple Hughes.
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everybody and to be able to still have this format. Case in point, we need Zoom. We need internet. When I read your question with regards to you saying that this bill or this opportunity that we had during the legislative session won't help and it still be the Eastern Shore as a desert, I got a little offended by that. And I say that for this reason, because we worked hard. I mean, that bill was something all the way down to the very end of session that we had to get across the hall, across the gate, whatever you want to call it. The point is that the Eastern Shore needs broadband. And we had to, and specifically being it was my bill, I had to make that known to members of the Economic Matters Committee, known over to everybody in the House of Delegates, how imperative and how important this is. So this is a step in the right direction. This is a tool where we have put in measures for it to be a pilot, so we can utilize this model for other parts of the state of Maryland. I was actually fighting against one of my colleagues from St. Mary's County County, Southern Maryland, that wanted what we were doing, as well as Western Maryland wants to use this as a model. So I think we need to celebrate that the Eastern Shore is a model. We are going to take care of some of those spectrums or some of those areas where we need to have broadband and address each child and each telehealth issue that needs to be addressed, because right now we all are sitting on and begging for internet. So to that end, you know, I'm going to have to applaud what we've done, and we're going to continue to measure what Chop Tank is able to deliver.
Thank you, Delegate Hughes.
Preach.
Senator Eckert?
Thank you very much. Yes, this was a step in the right direction, and kudos to Chop Tank Cooperative for all the effort they put into that, and the whole team worked diligently on that, and we made sure that we covered every single thing we could. So it's a very good piece of legislation moving forward. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. That gets us part of the way, but we have to continue to work on a comprehensive strategy. And I really think after the work we did this year, we need to reestablish the broadband task force that we had that was for the Eastern Shore, to be able to look at a comprehensive plan moving forward. We have some money coming out of the federal level that I think, because of the CARES legislation, we have the potential to do some expansion there. There are new technologies. Well, I have Verizon and Comcast right here where I'm sitting, and I can't get access sometimes. So I have to use my phone and link my phone to be able to get out on the internet. So there are a lot of things before us. We need to continue to push to make sure that the Eastern Shore gets what we need to be able to do our business, to get our kids educated, and to be able to provide health care. We're doing a lot of telehealth. We are so glad that we were able to pass those initiatives to provide access to telehealth, because all of our mental health services, and actually some of my Alzheimer's groups, were doing by Zoom. So
Thank you, Senator Eckert.
Senator Carrozza?
Thank you. I first want to thank the Salisbury Chamber of Commerce for holding this forum, and also for all you're doing assisting our small businesses through COVID-19 recovery and reopenings. Very quickly, this is a priority for the entire Eastern Shore. This is something that all 9 representatives, delegates, senators from all 9 counties of the Eastern Shore made this a priority. And echoing, this was a heavy lift to get this bill passed. And I do want to compliment Cherie Sample Hughes for really pushing it, and the other members on the House side and on the Senate side. Senator Eckert's been involved in this issue with the task force, as well as Senator Steve Hershey really out front to make sure we could complete this. COVID-19 has elevated the importance of the need for our rural accessibility for broadband, and you can count on this entire delegation to continue to make it a priority, because it's also an issue of equity, whether we're talking about our students and schools, our businesses, to be competitive. So this will continue to be a priority for the entire delegation. Thank you for the question.
Okay, moving forward. I symbolically ripped up the questions we had put together 2.5 months ago, because they were basically invalidated, and it can be argued that COVID-19 has done exactly the same thing to your budget. Given that occurred, all state budgets are going to have severe shortfalls. What would you suggest is the future for Kirwan funding, considering that? Does the entire Kirwan funding formula need to be scrapped for the foreseeable future? And let's do it backwards this time. We'll put Senator Carrozza back on immediately to answer that one, and we'll go back in the opposite direction.
Well, I think most of my colleagues and some of your members know that I've been involved with the Kirwan process for the past 3 years, really trying to advocate for as much local authority and flexibility as possible, leaving a lot of these decisions up to our local jurisdictions. Now that Kirwan has been vetoed, and I did not think we should go forward with it. I had issues to begin with, but then it's simply not affordable. And that's why Governor Hogan, one of the reasons he vetoed it, it's simply not affordable. You know, I believe that we need to work with our locals, find out what in Kirwan actually works for them at the local level. and stay focused there, because I believe that our locals know best on what they need in our individual school systems. So maybe lift out the best of from Kirwan, but as far as the current formula, it's simply unaffordable.
Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. I worked very diligently, as did my colleague from the Lower Shore, on the Kirwan, even though we had different perspectives on it. And I really liked all that we were able to get in with regard to school mental health and dealing with kids as early as possible, to be able to prevent the preschool to prison pipeline that so often occurs. And COVID has changed everything for us. And I think we really now are at a place where we need to rethink Kirwan. We need to rethink the best of what's in it, and we need to see how our education system is going to change based on the use of teleeducation in a way that we've never done before. So I think the governor's vetoed it. That will probably be challenged, but I think we need to take a reassessment, relook at it, and take the best of what works in the worst of times and see what we can do with local authority and accountability.
Speaker Pro Tem Semple Hughes.
Sure. Certainly, thank you for the question. With regards to scrapping, no, I would say we probably need to modify it. The one thing I will look to, and I think this comes from the days of when I was on the Wycomico County Council, was looking to reports, and we're supposed to be getting one for a state of Maryland from Moody's, one of our rating agencies, to see, you know, where we are financially, to see how the impact of COVID has taken our state in another direction. With that being said, the need to look at Kirwan, yes, we need to look at it, but I don't want to negate the fact that the points within Kirwan of making sure that we are educating our children, making sure we are addressing the mental health needs within that. I think the components of Kirwan are relevant, and they still are to this day, even beyond this COVID-19. The one last thing that I will mention is that, you know, for Wycomico County, and the construction funds were tied to Kirwan. This is part of the reason that the governor, I guess, it meant to veto it, or maybe he didn't mean to. But Wycomico County, we had 100% of the construction funds that were going to be in that bill, and then 14.6 million of it for FY 2022, and then they're on to 24 million. I think for our lower Eastern Shore counties, we're going to come out of this in a better place as far as what we committed to Kirwan in the first place. So I'll end it there because I see our time.
When people just get scared because Carrie actually comes on, now you're starting to feel out how I feel. Delegate Adams.
So the State Board of Revenue estimates Maryland's going to lose $2.8 billion. Obviously, our current budget that we're living in now.
Chris, if I can interrupt you for just a second. Somebody is not muted and we can hear your phone call in the back. Would you please take care of that? And we'll go back to Delegate Adams.
When it's time to get that done, you do it for me, okay? Okay. Enjoy the rest.
Ready to go?
Well, we'll get that done for you, whoever
She's going to get it done first. Let her get it done. Let her get it done.
I'll see you again, but keep on working with that mirror because I want.
I'm going to work with that mirror every day.
Okay? And how you're holding your neck. And
Greg, if you want to start, or you just want me to go?
There we go.
Can you mute them?
Go ahead, Chris. I think we got it muted.
All right, so what I was going to say, the State Board of Revenue estimates that Maryland's going to lose $2.8 billion because of the crisis, and that's at least $1 billion over the next 90 days. So we're obviously living in a real-world situation. The Kirwan bill was irresponsible in some level from a funding standpoint anyhow, but let me just articulate where the governor stands on this. For every 6 years that he's presented a budget, he's given historic funding to K through 12 education. We've invested a record $7.3 billion into K through 12 education, above and beyond the mandates that come from the legislature. It is the largest, K through 12 spending is the largest general fund expenditure, 34%, or $6.6 billion of the $19.4 billion general fund, and more than 75% of the entire capital budget goes towards education. So let me just say to you this, that the Kirwan bill does need to be parked. We do need to look at it. I don't necessarily disagree with the Speaker Pro Tem and that there needs to be some modifications. There's parts of that bill that have virtue. But at the end of the day, it takes money to make these sort of investments. I think, personally, as your legislator on the Eastern Shore, that the governor has made historic investments and has done everything that the school systems are asking for and need. Kirwan was always going to be on top of that. So $32 billion on top of what's already historic. And we really need to step back and say, is now the right time to add $32 billion on top of what the governor is already doing? Or are we going to look at the governor who has made responsible historic investments, and can we stick with what he's done, which I think is a question.
Thank you, Delegate Adams.
Sure.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. I think we have two questions here, the funding and funding formula. As far as funding, it never was funded, even with, this past session, there were many attempts to fund it with tax increases and so forth. And I think everyone agrees that education is a priority, but even at that, Maryland cannot handle any more tax increases. I think there are pieces of the bill that deserve merit, and I think it'd be done over time. I'd love to see, at least here for our area, career and technology, that aspect of it can, continue to be a priority. Warwick Community College is certainly, has the ability to handle some of that training for those who missed those opportunities when they were in high school or whatever years they would have been receiving that training. We're seeing programs finally start to change. There are so many jobs that are available here that we don't have the people, available and trained to fill them. So I think pieces of it need to be implemented. But as far as, taking $4 billion a year, I hope that day never comes back. It's just, to me, not the way we should go about it. The other side of the coin with, the way the funding formula existed, every child was not treated the same in Maryland. Until Maryland gets serious about education and funding every child regardless of the county they live in, I wouldn't be able to support the legislation. That's part of the reason.
Thank you for your response. Thank you.
Delegate Motz.
Yeah, just quickly, I agree with the sentiment that it needs to be modified and reviewed. I think it's important for everybody to keep in mind that what we're experiencing right now is a long-term experience. It's not over. And the economic consequences, our budget shortfalls, what we have to work with, we really don't know right now. And to say this is how we're going to move forward, I don't think is something you can really rely on. I think we definitely need to plan on modifying and reviewing what's been approved, what can happen, what can't happen. But we don't know where we're going to be next January. There are a lot of businesses that people are banking on returning. And I think that some of the things we're banking on happening are still up in the air. We've got some major hurdles to overcome to start this economic recovery. And from the way I approach this is, yes, we have to modify it, but don't start making decisions quite yet until we know we're on firm ground and when businesses are open and the economy is running. So with that in mind, I think we need to plan on modifying, reviewing, but also be very much attuned to what's happening within our economy because we don't know yet. That's still playing out.
Delegate Otto.
Thank you, sir. I agree about the modifications to Kirwan. There's elements in it that I liked a lot, but a lot of things that I didn't care for and I thought were ridiculous. But I think the last 2 months have taught some of our educational professionals a lot of innovation and ideas that can be implemented and at a lot cheaper price. And it's unfortunate we go through these circumstances, but I'm sure they've learned a lot about utilizing Zoom or having lessons planned and creative methods to continue an education process that can be incorporated hopefully when we get back in the classroom.
Delegate Anderton.
Yeah, I'm gonna save some time for one of the questions coming up. So I'm just gonna say that, modification, of course, there's no way that we can do anything to take more money out of folks' pockets at this particular time because of the COVID experience we're all living. So, a pause button. I love the bill itself. I just don't like the way it's being paid for. And so, if that's where we are, I don't see a way forward with increasing taxes at any point for any reason at this time right now.
This question was not on the list of questions sent originally, but I think it's important enough that I wanted to visit it. And I'm going to couch it by telling a personal story. Several weeks ago, I went over to Ocean City, and as I walked up to the Royal Farms, there was a state trooper with his legs set, spread apart, arms crossed, standing in the doorway, making sure everyone had a mask on that came in or out. When I stopped in the donut shop, I know I don't need any more donuts, but there was a state trooper there as well, making sure that everything was being done properly and giving instructions to the owner about what he needed to do to make sure he managed it properly. There's a lot of pushback to these draconian style shutdown orders, including the one in Maryland, that are happening all over the country. And there's a lot of evidence to indicate it isn't necessarily getting the outcome or being as big a part of the outcome as just social distancing. But without getting into that, 3 Republican legislators have now filed suit against the administration, joining several businesses to try and speed the opening of the economy in Maryland. I would like each of your comments about how you feel about that legislation. Frankly, there is no governor in the country who makes law and establishes punishments. That's not an executive function, it's a legislative function. And if you as a legislature give that power to the governor, what are you prepared to do to bring it back in when this is over? And what happens the next time we have an epidemic? So I realize that's long-winded, but I'll give you latitude on how you choose to answer that. Delegate Anderson, you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. The lawsuit, I think, is, again, we were just talking about tax dollars being wasted. That's exactly what this is. I think it's just pure posturing by my colleagues. And when I see them in person, I'll tell them in person. And I think it's a waste of tax money in a time of dire fiscal strains. As for executive orders and reining in and all that, I'm sure that there will be bill after bill after bill filed in January to try to strip more authority away from the governor. And I don't really know how I feel about that right now. I think the governor was doing what he felt based off of the science he was given was the best thing for us. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I know that I agree with it more than I disagree. As long as there's a definite timetable, and we need to make sure people are whole. The number one issue I'm dealing with is unemployment for folks. The fact that we're sitting here in May and people ain't got money since March is a joke and embarrassment to all of us. And that is my issue. Dealing with executive orders, we can deal with that mess in January. Right now, I want to get people paid. This website, the people in Annapolis working with unemployment is an embarrassment to all of us. And I'll just be quiet now because you got me fired up.
Delegate Otto.
I tend to agree some with what Delegate Anderson said there, but we did pass the executive powers for emergencies this year, and that was submitted earlier through. And I understand where Delegate Cox from Frederick County and those following the suit are concerned about. And when, medical marijuana distributor is more important than going to church is a problem. I think people would have, as you said, voluntarily done the right thing. And I think they have quite well. And that, like you said, the strong arm actions, that's not in Maryland. And I was very discouraged when we had a Humvee from the National Guard in front of the State House that last week we were in session in March. And I sent that message to the governor, but it stayed there. But we stayed in Annapolis a week longer than we should have too. So Thank you.
Delegate Motz.
Yeah, so about the executive orders and the executive authorities, ordinarily, we're in a situation where it's the legislature versus the governor, or the executive versus the legislature, and who can do what and who has certain powers. Rarely have we been in a situation where the legislature was not in session to offset or to challenge or to question or support actions of the executive. Right now, the only way to challenge executive orders is to go to court. So I can understand consternation about people filing challenges, but I also understand the need to be able to go to court. Oftentimes, when we're in a new place in history, the powers that are being used have not been used in our lifetimes, and hopefully they'll never be used again. I think that as we move forward to open Maryland, the governor, the executive has gotten themselves into a situation where they're having to pick which businesses can operate and which ones cannot operate. So I suspect there will be more wrangling and more legal challenges and more questions about the authority, whether it's enforceable, how it's enforceable, what's fair, and kind of what's going on. Right now, things are happening very quickly, and we haven't done this before. So I'm concerned about the decisions we're making, but I'm also relieved in the fact that there is an open door and there's a willingness for people to try to figure out the best for everyone. It's a challenging time, and it requires everyone to be engaged to try to bring about the best because, like I said, it's a very delicate balance.
Thank you, Delegate Waltz.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. Your question about the lawsuit, everybody has their own way of expressing themselves or whatever. Delegate Cox, I think one of the main delegates behind it, he's an attorney. So his way of expressing himself is through litigation. Part of there was three bases of the lawsuit. One of them being people's, right to go to church. And, I think a lot of these things are overreaching. Initially, there were a lot of unknowns. I think, the precautions beginning early on in this help flatten the curve. But, we've learned a lot. People have accepted the face mask and so forth, the social distancing. And I think now it's time that, we start to move forward and allow businesses to open with precautions and protocols in place. During the session, there was a bill that came through, House Bill 650. Looking back at that bill now, and this was something from the administration that would have an emergency bill to expand the governor's authority in a state of emergency, which would have allowed for the, taking a private property, and it was just a really extreme radical bill. So looking back, seeing that bill and that thought process from the administration and seeing what's happening now, I'm concerned. And to hear that state police resources are being used to stand in front of a business, I think, a business owner, those who own the property, are the ones that are responsible for administering, that protocol. And, hearing those resources being used that way is disappointing.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Greg. I think it's difficult to armchair quarterback this particular issue. The governor declared executive orders, trying to do his best to resolve an issue as we're dealing with it real time. So when we're watching this happen, I believe that first off, my first comment on the lawsuit should be there's no comment. But the truth matter is it would never have occurred to me to actually sue the governor. There are so many other ways as your Eastern Shore delegation to communicate frustrations and anger directly to the governor that a lawsuit should not be necessary. Now, that being said, I wrote a letter on Monday. It was a fully throated support of the business community. And in my path and my method is to appeal to the governor, let him know that on the ground, certain things that we're seeing simply aren't going to pass muster. We live in a free and civil society. Businesses are hanging on by a thread. In many cases, they're days or weeks away from losing all remaining liquidity. So we can't have the business community simply going out of business left and right. So my ask to the governor, not through the courts, but rather through my office, which is in all of our cases a very powerful position to have governor is to say we need to reopen the state of Maryland. We need to protect civil liberties, and we need to do this sooner rather than later. And hopefully the governor today at 5 o'clock is getting that message in each of our own ways of delivering it. Just my way is not to necessarily go to the courts. To the issue of the Maryland State Police enforcing, I have real problems with that, Greg, and thank you for raising that as a real-time issue. We need to stop that.
Thank you, Delegate Adams.
Speaker Pro Tem Sample Hughes.
Thank you for the question. Starting off, the lawsuit, I thought it was ridiculous, and I still do think it's ridiculous. Yes, I know they're my colleagues, but I don't think that was the measure that was necessary to go against the governor. What I will say, and I've said this to members of the Eastern Shore Delegation, I believe Governor Hogan, in this unprecedented time, has done and will continue to do his best in the knowledge that he has from the health officials. We have to remember, this is a public health crisis that we have not entertained, we have not been a part of ever in our lifetime. And with that being said, there are times where we need to really look to the three branches of government to do their due diligence. Before we left the legislature, we made sure that there were funds in place for the rainy day fund, or additional funds, I should say, so Governor Hogan could make potential measures to expand and open old hospitals and do all that was needed for the public health measures. So that was our part. He was doing his due diligence. As we move forward, yes, we probably need to look at ways to improve upon some of these agencies that, in my opinion, are not doing their best. The unemployment is through the roof. I know you're probably tired of hearing that, but so is DHR with regards to people not having their food stamps. That in and of itself is a problem, because we're looking at the bare necessities, what people are in need of. That's where our focus should be as legislators, and not suing the governor.
Senator Eckert.
Thank you very much. And I would agree with pretty much what everybody has been talking about. I did not agree with the lawsuit. I think it's a waste of time and resources. The legislature gave the governor broad authority in a time of emergency, which is needed. It was a public health crisis. He needed to be decisive. He needed to pull people together, and he needed to act based on the best information he had available to him. It's a real tightrope when we're talking about the balance of public health and the greater good for all involved, but yet the economy is a big piece of that. And I think we're going to look back on this and look at our lessons learned and be able to do things differently, to be able to allow due process, to be able to get more engagement from the legislature as we move forward, because we do need all three separate branches of government, and they need to be able to react and to act in a very deliberate kind of way.
Senator Carrozza.
Thank you. I'm glad the Speaker Pro Tem noted that we did pass legislation given the authority to the governor, and these are emergency authorities, number one. Number two, as far as the lawsuits, there's so many better ways that's been described to express your views and advocate for your constituents, and it ends up becoming a distraction and a waste of money from working towards a safe recovery and reopenings. We, as representing our districts, are focused on constituent service, helping our constituents with their unemployment claims, those businesses that have applied for loans and grants. And we're working very closely on reopening, a safe reopening that can be done in a productive way. When the executive orders come out, when the governor updates his executive order today, we're going to have a lot of questions from our business community on the interpretive guidance. And we're going to have to go back and forth. And it is a process because we haven't done this before. So I think that's a more productive use of our time, is when these executive orders come out, to then make sure we can get clarification for our constituents, for our small business operators. And I think we'll see that happen later today when the governor makes his announcement.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to go straight to the close here. If you have submitted personal questions privately to Bill Chambers, we will make it a point to get those to the legislators, have them respond appropriately, and we will publish the responses in a newsletter format.
Greg, if I could just...
Delegate will have a minute. Go
If I
ahead,
could
Bill.
just interrupt you for 1 second, I had several folks in the meeting send me information wanting to thank the delegation for their unanimous role in approving Speaker Jones' HBCU settlement bill. So I had several folks express that. And I had an individual express sincere thanks to our Speaker Pro Tem for her leadership on the Chop Tank broadband legislation. So I just wanted to pass those comments on.
Tremendous. Let's start at the top again, and I'll give each of you a minute to a minute and a half to give a closing summation of how you think the legislative session went in a very trying time, and any thoughts you have moving forward. Delegate Anderson?
Sure, yeah. I thought it was a great session up to a point, and then it became something we've never seen before. So I want to give a shout out to my staff person, Kendall. She is really just been incredible through all this the past 8 weeks with all the unemployment issues and, working through them. We're getting some successes now, near enough. We've got a long way to go. As a matter of fact, as soon as I hit exit from this, I'm jumping back on the phone in Annapolis trying to get people money they really need. But we did some really good things. We saw a massive compromise between the mayor and the county executive on the liquor licensing board. That was cool. It was a conversation that the Speaker Pro Tem and I had out in the parking lot in the rain about how to modify this bill from a city bill to a county bill, because every county bill we've done has been unanimous, and we wanted it to continue that way. And Chris worked with me drafting amendments for the bill, and Wayne had input, and Johnny's up there somewhere. Johnny had input. It was a team effort, and I just want to give everybody a shout out for that. We have a great team working in Annapolis. Our 2 senators across the hall that let me come over there whenever I'm able to bug them about things that are going on. And we just have a really great team that works well together, and I couldn't be any more lucky than to work with our team, and especially Otto, who sits behind me. The masked turkey hunter, the midnight rider. But I love each every one of y'all, and I just want to tell you through this trying time, the fact that we managed to stick together and have a single heartbeat just shows the way that life should work in politics everywhere. So I just want to thank all of you.
Delegate Otto.
Well said, Delegate Anderson. We've strived hard to work together, and I think that shows us some of our success. And I too have been concerned about these, and I'm going on the Economic Matters Committee is having a briefing. You can go on the website of the General Assembly and click into that. The one went, 5 hours yesterday, Addie, or in the Senate?
1 to 10.
But this is with the Secretary of Labor. Will be there now, so maybe we'll find out what they're doing and what's going to. And I would tune into the governors. As you say, everything's fluid. We don't know what the revenues are going to be. We're going to have to tighten our belts, both locally and by the state. And another $1 trillion of borrowed money from the next generation is not going to save us.
Delegate Motz.
Thanks a million, and it's great to see everybody. The session kind of almost got washed out because of the health crisis. But as Delegate Anderson said, this was my 6th session. I had not seen us as a delegation work so closely together. It's difficult at times because people can't always do whatever. They can't all be the same. They can't vote the same. They can't say the same. But we worked, I think, as a delegation, especially for the Lower Delmarva, as well as ever. And I think that's a great thing. This coming year is going to be really hard. I think there are a lot of unknowns that we haven't faced yet. And hopefully the experience of what we just built working together, moving into this coming January, is going to make us that much stronger. I've always said that shutting down and preparing for the virus is going to be much easier than reopening and recovering. It's going to require a lot of luck and a whole lot of hard work. to get our step back. And that process is probably going to take the rest of the year, and it may carry into next year. So that's just a nice message on a way to end. I don't have any dramatic conclusions, but it was a very productive session, and I think we all did an excellent job working together.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. No, I must say the session started off great. The budget this year was a great budget, well balanced. My transition from judiciary to Ways and Means, I felt a lot more effective. A lot of time spent on Kirwan and all the tax bills, that I mentioned earlier, the data storage bill and so forth. So there are a lot of local issues that I felt, I could advocate better for in my new role, new committee. A lot of legislation was lost at the end, unfortunately. But, with that said, at the same time, some legislation went through. I think Governor Hogan did a great job with his vetoes. And I do want to be on record as saying that, up until even yesterday, there's been frequent communication from my office to the Secretary of Commerce and the Governor's office, trying to get as many businesses open in phase 1 as possible, so that we get the economy going. The unemployment, to hear the Governor say that the unemployment issues were fixed, frustrating for a lot of people. It's far from fixed. And, there are a lot of people, 85% of the people may not be affected, but those 15 or 20% are, there's some desperate situations out there, and our office is spending a lot of time working with those people, trying to get them through it. Earlier on, it was a lot of the grants and so forth for the businesses. And it seems like our office is right now being overwhelmed with the unemployment issues, and we're going to continue working on to get people through that.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Greg. And, everyone on the delegation knows that we're constitutionally mandated to only pass one bill each year, and that's our budget. I've had 6 years in service to Maryland, and each of these 6 budgets that we've passed, this is going to be viewed in history as being, from my perspective, easy budgets to pass. Frankly, our hardest work is coming up in the next couple years. As we're looking at this next budget that surely is going to have dramatic, significant shortfalls in revenue. Let me just say to that point that I serve on the Economic Matters Committee. The business community is the driver of tax revenue, economic development, jobs. So when we talk about unemployment, there really is only one long-term solution to the unemployment issue, and it's not to fix government. It's to get government out of the way, get businesses back in a spot where they're employing people, making money, paying payroll taxes, paying back into UI for people that need it. So we have some of the hardest work that I think any General Assembly has had in the recent history, trying to look at our budget moving forward. My only comment about up to this point is that while it was a truncated legislative session, it needed to be, our budget under the governor has been so very responsible, absolutely prioritizing money, how we spend it, where we spend it, having a rainy day fund, which we are surely going to exhaust, trying to come out of this mess. So let me just applaud the governor for that, because it puts us in the very best spot walking into session next year as we do the hardest work trying to pass the next budget that we are constitutionally mandated to pass. Everything else is second to that particular issue. So Greg, thank you for letting me close. That's my comment on that.
Delegate Sample Hughes, this is the first time as a group we have had the opportunity to congratulate you publicly on your, call it a promotion, I suppose. You are now the most powerful representative on the Eastern Shore in probably 20 years. And we appreciate that. Thank you for your representation of our issues. And I'll let you take it from there.
Sure, thank you, and thank you, everyone. I'd just like to first say, this session naturally is very different, serving as Speaker Pro Tem, but it's certainly one that I walked into humbly and very thankful of the support of my Eastern Shore colleagues, because this started off when we were in our Eastern Shore delegation meeting. They gave me a book, they all signed it, which certainly helped to give me the foundation I needed to continue to move forward in this position. there were many times, or a couple times, where I was at the rostrum leading the floor session, and my colleagues on the Eastern Shore on the left, on the House side, they were making faces and trying to get me to laugh. I tried to keep a poker face, but nevertheless, it was an interesting session. I didn't realize that as Speaker Pro Temp, I'd be putting out a lot of fires, a lot of things that people didn't even get to see or experience. But it was all for the good of the order and all for the good of the Maryland General Assembly. When we were meeting regularly, the leadership, Speaker Jones and I, we work extremely well together. I was always at the helm stating, this is what I need for the Eastern Shore. And I was able to navigate those channels, especially over in appropriations. I'm not on that committee, but in particular, making sure Maggie McIntosh was aware of the challenges that we had, the 9 counties on the Eastern Shore, and the funds that we may not be able to come up with as it related to Kirwan and some of the other big number expensive issues. The other thing I will say is that, Eastern Shore Delegation, we were in lockstep as it comes to agricultural and small business community. And so to that end, it was extremely important to have that message and continue on that same line of thinking. Right before we ended session, we created the COVID-19 work group. I'm on that work group. And again, that's an opportunity for me to share with all the needs and the concerns that we have on the Eastern Shore as it relates to COVID-19. We did our best in this legislative session. We passed numerous bills that relates to healthcare. One in particular that I sponsored was the one that deals with reimbursement of physicians, to get them in underserved areas, to get them here working in the communities that desperately need specialties. And so just to want to close out by saying, because I don't want Carrie to get me, but I wanted to just say that we're going to continue to work extremely well together, but it does come back to these type of forums for us to hear what are the concerns, what are the needs, so we can address those in Annapolis with our colleagues and make the best times that we can. And so with that being said, just know that I'm available, continue to reach out to me. We will continue to work together. And I will certainly continue to have the ear of the speaker so we can have the chamber, we can have the Greater Salisbury and all those entities and businesses and everyday citizens' voices heard in Annapolis by way of my service. Thank you.
Before I move on to the senators, just quickly to recap, there are several excellent questions. We had the impact on the agriculture community by COVID-19 and the real estate development, local legislative requests, and a question about education and discipline in the classrooms. We will submit those as well as any other questions that came privately from the audience, and the delegates and senators will have an opportunity to give you a response to those, and we'll publish those for everyone. In addition, this has been recorded and will be on YouTube shortly, and we'll make sure that everyone has an opportunity to see that if you wish, and to please share it with anybody you know who couldn't be here today. So that said, Senator Eckert, your closing, please.
Thank you very much. It was the best and the worst of times. I've never sat through a session where we were doing bill crossover and sine die on the same week. So they're both the most intense times in the legislative session. And there we were scrambling to get our bills to the other house, and at the same time trying to wrap it up so we could get out of Annapolis. We did accomplish a lot. If you know, I had an integrative health bill which would prevent physicians who refer to integrative medicine for Lyme's disease and other types of disorders from being reprimanded by their professional boards. That passed after many, many years and a lot of hard work. We were able to pass the bill that would eliminate the sales tax on aircraft parts. That's going to be great for Salisbury as the economy picks up. We were able to get some failing septic subdivisions into using the Chesapeake Bay funds to be able to get hooked up so we have adequate sewer. That was really important, and a nurse practitioner bill, and then the chop tank bill. So I think a lot of those pieces of legislation lay the groundwork for what we're going to be building on in the future. It's not going to be easy, not at all. We have a lot of education to do with our consumers, whether it's just wearing masks, maintaining personal responsibility, if one is sick, staying home, how we've changed education, how we will change the workplace, all of the things that are, life is not going to be the same. The budget's going to be a real challenge. Sitting on budget and tax, we'll probably be getting some of the reductions that the governor's thinking about moving forward because of that shortfall, big shortfall between now and June 30th, and then how we move forward as we slowly reopen and are able to regroup and change. So it's going to take all of us working together. We work together as a great team, respecting each other's differences, and we had a lot this year, but we learned to work through it in spite of ourselves to get a good, effective Eastern Shore delegation team effort on a number of fronts. So I'm thankful to each of the members for what you've contributed to that and how we will work forward with all the challenges facing us, not only with local governments and municipal governments, but with state, and then dealing with all the federal money and where it's going to go and how it's going to be spent. So thank you, Bill and team, for the opportunity to share today. We always learn as much. I always learn as much as I give whenever we have these forums. So thank you all.
Senator Carrozza.
Thank you. COVID-19 has changed each one of our lives. And whether you're a family, whether you're a patient, a family member of a patient, our medical personnel, our frontline workers in the food supply chain, poultry industry, grocery workers, our students, our parents, our elderly, you know, when we think about new ways of learning with school not being open. And so I think we first of all have to absorb that. And for us as representing our districts, it's changed our roles. I mean, think about this. This was the first time in 2020 that the Maryland General Assembly adjourned early, the first time since the Civil War. And then we come back to our districts and we see our constituents in so much pain. So we did hear some of the highlights of what we did get our business done before we adjourned. And I'm glad Delegate Adams highlighted the fact that our one constitutional responsibility is to pass the budget, and we passed a good budget. You know, that's balanced and no tax increases. We did give the governor the emergency authorities he needed to handle and to work through and to lead in this COVID-19 pandemic. We did give the telehealth options as well, which is now we really need. We're so glad we're past that legislation that Senator Eckerd mentioned, because we need that as a tool during this stay-at-home order. And then you heard about some of the other priorities that are important to our area that we were able to get done. The broadband bill, it's huge, and it will increase rural access and make it more equitable for our students and our businesses. And the aircraft parts tax exemption bill, that was a heavy lift. Senator Eckerd and Delegate Adams and other members of the delegation have been working on that for years, and that's important for our competitiveness right here at the Salisbury Regional Airport. So, you know, despite everything, we're proud of those accomplishments. And now what you're seeing is each one of us is our immediate focus right now is to help our constituents with their individual issues, whether it's their unemployment claims, whether it's the small business loans or grants that they're going to need for their survival. We're helping them reopen with their safe guidelines so we can show with self-responsibility that these employers are putting in safeguards for their employers, for their employees, their visitors, their guests, for the general public. And that's where we need to focus right now and make sure this next phase, which is so important with the governor's announcement, how we can make sure we're successful with a safe reopening of these businesses and an overall recovery. I also want to just a quick shout out, the leadership at PRMC have been at the forefront, you know, with their recommendations at the state level, and we're going to continue to their recommendations. And also, I want to compliment the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce, and with Bill Chambers being on the state level, he will have be able to impact what we will need to do on a policy level going forward to make sure that we are working on good policies that will help our small businesses survive for the future. So these recovery events that you're doing and forums are very important, and you can count on us as a delegation to work with you. Thank you very much for hosting this.
And I will say thank you to everyone on the call, the delegates and senators, for their willingness to come through and visit with us in this format, and for everyone else for allowing us to present this kind of a format and being flexible.
Greg?
I think it's, yeah, Bill, go ahead.
I have one piece of information. Delegate Mounts wanted me to tell everybody that the Economic Matters Committee is holding a briefing with DLLR Secretary Robinson today at 2. It's viewable via the Maryland General Assembly website, so anyone can view this. That obviously is going to be about the issues with unemployment insurance benefits. And I also want to implore the delegation on, while we're reopening and we're being thoughtful and at the same time some level of aggressiveness as well for our business owners, liability protections for our businesses and organizations is a key factor. Some will say we've got liability protections in place, but in the litigious society that we lived in before COVID, that won't change post-COVID. And liability protections for businesses and organizations to protect them from lawsuits filed by employees or customers who contract COVID, whether they did on their premises or not. And then unfortunately that person contracts it, gives it to someone else, and there are horrible circumstances. We need to address this because I'm hearing from a lot of businesses that are ready to go, but they're not comfortable without some additional protection on the liability piece.
Exactly.
And with that, I will tie this up by saying, obviously, we are all well aware, having had as many Zoom meetings as we've had in the past 8 weeks or so, that it's critically important that we open these salons and barbershops. And God bless everybody in getting there as soon as they do.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was the mean timer.
You're good.
Girl, you did good.
Bye.
You're good.